Hey guys, welcome back to the True North podcast. My name is James McKenzie. On this week's episode, we have Jeff Balanchik. He's going to come on and share his story and share what all he's doing right now that actually might be a good resource for you. So we look forward to that conversation. But first, I wanted to let you guys know that all of our fall dates for 2025 are up on the website. There is a new camp that we just listed, the Kansas Basecamp, which will be in September. We also have an Oklahoma base camp in September, and then we have a November base camp in Oklahoma and a November base camp in Texas. So check out all those dates. In between all of those is our next advanced retreat, the Summit. That is October 16th through the 19th. And then we've got all the frontiers that are still left for this year. Check out Sacred Journey's website. They have an advanced camp as well if you've been to their first retreat. So lots of fun things to get into and be a part of this fall. Check it all out on our website, truenorth.live. And right now, we'll kick it over to the podcast. Jeff Balanchik, welcome to the True North podcast, man.
Thank
How are
you.
you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Good. We got Ryan in studio with us.
Yep.
Looking forward to kind of walking through Jeff's story. Jeff, I've gotten to know you for a long time, and you've been a big part of what True North does. You've led the prayer team. You've led Conquer groups for many years. You're kind of the head guy for that, the head contact for us for many years of doing that. And so thank you for coming on the podcast. We thought this would be an excellent time to have you on to share kind of what God's done in your life and what he's doing now and how that can be a resource to other people. Yeah. And so let's start right now. What does your life situation look like right now? You know, marriage, kids, all that.
Well, yeah. So I've been married to Andrea for 22 years this year.
Wow.
So almost 22.
Nice.
We got a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old, Bree and Evan, and they're awesome. Just I love having teenage girls that, well, now they're starting to launch. They're barely even teenagers anymore. So, gosh, it's hard to believe how fast that's gone by, how grown up they get so quickly. But yeah, marriage is great. Andrea and I have been able to work well together through the years in so many ways. We balance each other very well. I know not everybody gets to have quite such that exactly. You know, we've certainly had our share of problems that we've had to work through. You know, one in particular that comes to mind is that many years ago, Andrea had to sit me down and let me know that every time that I said yes to something else, you know, somebody says, hey, you want to go grab a coffee, you want to go grab a beer, you want to go out to a True North retreat, you know, whatever it is. Anytime I'm saying yes to that, I'm saying no to time with family. And I didn't realize that, you know, and it was years ago that my wife shared that with me, and it was just this aha moment. And so things like that, it still comes up. I still have to check every time, like, wait a minute, is this time that I want to spend doing something else? But those are the kinds of back and forth relationships that are the relationship that we've had through the years that has just helped us to stay balanced. Yeah. And I really treasure that with my wife. She's fantastic.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's rewind back into kind of your raising. And were you raised in the church or?
Yeah, I was actually. I kind of grew up in the church. My mom was a church organist.
Okay.
So I think we were there more than the pastor's kids were. Like, she was always up there practicing on the organ or, you know, church choir practice or whatever. So we were constantly there. I'm one of four, got two brothers and a sister. And so we were always running around the church searching for leftover donuts or, you know, just finding whatever trouble we could get into. And because we were kind of on our own hanging out there in the church, they let us have a lot of license. So yeah, I grew up in the church. What that kind of did for me, though, is it taught me how to say the right things, you know, taught me how to get along with that crowd, even though it was a different crowd than the crowd back home. So I didn't go to church with anybody from the neighborhood or anybody that I went to school with. So I had two totally separate groups. And in doing that, that kind of had allowed this pose to happen to where I was really good at being a chameleon in one group. I could say all the church things. They all thought that I was a perfect little church guy, youth group guy. And then I could say totally different things, have a totally different set of language, behavior, everything else to the family or to friends and schoolmates. So yeah, it was definitely the case that growing up, I kind of lived two separate lives.
Did you have an awareness then that was happening? And
I kind of did. There's one story comes to mind. This kid from across the street playing basketball in my front yard, and I was cussing up a storm apparently because I remember him saying something like, "Man, you guys go to church and you cuss more than we do." And I was like, "Yeah, shut up." Probably gave him the bird and gave him some kind of choice word. Yeah. And then, later on when I was in junior high, I had a really good friend, Chris Kelly, and Chris and I were hanging out all the time. Every weekend we were spending the night at one of the two houses. We're just always together at school and every place else. But he invited me to come to church with him once, and I went to church with him. And then later on, he made some comment to me. It's like, "Hey, why don't you ever invite me to go to your church?" And I'm sure I made some kind of excuse, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking, because if I do, then I know I'll be exposed because people will see what you're like and realize that I'm not the same guy at school as I am here at church.
Wow.
So I had that.
How old were you at this point?
Probably 9th or 10th grade, 11th grade. So, old enough, but that was a definite realization that I'm living two separate lives here. I'm doing two different things.
Yeah. Did that ever come to a point where it got exposed?
It came together. It didn't really get exposed per se, but it came together I think it was the summer before my junior year in high school. I went to a camp, and there was a message by the camp speaker. She was talking about how when we're walking this Christian life, it's like we're walking against the flow of a river, and we always have to be pressing forward. We always have to be moving forward, or else if we stop, then the force of the river is going to push us backwards. And it's like the force of culture. It's just going to keep pushing us backwards. And, that message itself stuck with me, but it doesn't really speak to joining those two things together. But something at that camp just made it click that, if I'm going to be the Christian that I know I'm supposed to be, if I'm going to follow after Christ, I need to live it all the time. I can't walk forward some of the time and then let the flow of the world push me back the rest of the time, because I'm not getting anywhere. And so I decided at that point, I'm going to be who I say I'm going to be. Doesn't mean that everything was right. A lot of the issues, I think, just kind of went underground. At that point, I had already been introduced to pornography, so that pornography just went underground. That has a tendency to be a pretty secretive sin anyway. Yeah. But, it's not like everything came together exactly, but at that point in time, I made a pointed effort to try to stop living two different lives.
Yeah. So that's awesome to hear about the camp experience that early on. Like the bad rap that retreats and camp experiences gets is that it's a mountaintop moment, but you're sitting here talking about a speaker. Like, I can't think of how many lectures I sat through or stories I sat through in high school that I couldn't tell you what they were about, but clearly that stuck with you.
That
and
stuck.
I mean, that's life-changing to have that perspective. And there was kind of your line in the sand.
It was like a watershed moment.
Yeah. That's really cool. So that's high school, junior year high school. Where did it go from there?
Well, so I was planning on going to OU.
Okay.
My best friend at the time, he and I made plans. We were going to be roommates. We had everything scheduled. We were registered, the whole 9 yards. And it was after graduation from high school. So, literally months away, we were about to go. And then God opened up a window that The door was previously closed. So ended up going to Southern Nazarene University. My mom was a professor there, but she was whatever the level was that they didn't give any kind of like tuition remission. So I wasn't expecting anything. And then all of a sudden they came and they said, hey, we'll give you some tuition remission if you come here. And so it was too good of a deal to pass up. And I'm so glad that I ended up going that direction because I had a fantastic experience at SNU. Awesome. It was really great. I didn't end up going to OU with Jay like I thought that I would, but God took me in a different direction, So in doing that, it gave me a lot of new experiences with the people of the church, with followers of Christ. There were some good and some bad experiences for sure. But a funny thing is, it was actually where I first got introduced to marijuana was at Southern Nazarene University. Not on campus. It wasn't on campus. But it's funny that, you go through public school.
Anybody else right now.
You go through public school and, I knew it was all around, but I guess I was just in the Christian group circles, so I never got introduced to it. But then I come to SNU and that's where I finally, somebody offered it to me. It's like, no, I'm good. Thanks. But yeah, so man, my experience at SNU really was fantastic. I grew there spiritually, emotionally, relationally, have some great friends. Still my very best friend, that I was the best man at his wedding. He's the best man at mine. Casey Short. He's been a True North. Casey and I have been really close ever since. Yeah. So we connected at SNU. Lots of other guys that I went to church with, and then ended up going to SNU with, were the group that I hung out with, and we still talk. So really great experience. My wife went to Oklahoma Baptist at the same time. Okay. So we were kind of, rivals there for a little while, SNU and OBU, although, she and I weren't really together at that point in time. But so,
How would you describe your relationship with God up to this point in your life? Did you hear from him? Did you believe you could hear from him? Or what kind of?
I really didn't. I didn't believe that I could. It was never really taught in my circles.
Okay.
So nobody would ever actually say this, but the joke was at our church, we had Father, Son, and the Holy Scriptures. It's like Holy Spirit stuff is just kind of, it's nebulous, can't really put your finger on it. So it's safer just to kind of avoid it. And so there really wasn't any, there was never any talk that I remember about hearing from God, conversational relationship with the Lord. I'm sure there were probably people that did, but that was just my experience growing up. And so, at SNU, I kind of lived that same experience. It wasn't necessarily pushed or encouraged or taught to be able to hear from the Lord in that way, in the way that I've learned since. And maybe I was just running in the wrong circles. I don't know.
Yeah.
But up to that point, though, high school and into college, I was still very much steeped in pornography. It was very much a part of my life, hidden, but part of my life. And so there was an opportunity shortly after graduation. I had two uncles who are pastors of churches, and both of them within a matter of weeks, both of them contacted me independently and said that they would like for me to pray about coming out to be an associate pastor with them, a youth pastor or something like that. And, I think I probably told them that I prayed about it. I didn't really pray about it. I didn't even consider it. Yeah. Because I just knew in my heart, I just knew that if I went to be a pastor, I was going to get completely exposed. Because even then I felt like a poser. I knew I shouldn't be doing this stuff, but I wasn't really trying to quit at that point in time. But I knew that if I became a pastor, I would have to try to quit. And I didn't think that I had what it took.
Do you think that knowing the freedom that you've experienced now from the bondage of a pornography addiction, what do you think Jeff then would, if that stage of life for you had that freedom and got offered that position, do you think your response would have been different?
Oh yeah.
You would have loved with
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that would have been such an adventure to go and do that. It would have been amazing to see how God would work and to be able to watch God work and be a part of it. At that stage in life, it would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
I think that my biggest regret in that is I didn't really even pray about it.
Yeah.
Mm. I didn't seek God's direction on it. I just kind of made my choice based off of fear.
Mm-hmm.
You disqualified yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I did. And so if I would have taken the time to pray about it back then, maybe God would have led me. Maybe he would have given me the courage to do it.
Yeah.
And be willing to be exposed if that were to come, or give me the courage to overcome the problem that I had then, 25 years before I actually did find freedom from pornography, which would have been a total life change.
Yeah.
So many things could have been different. And, I don't know if you've seen the meme of the guy with the tattoos and no regrets. So that's one regret that I have, is that I wish that I would have taken the time and had the courage at that point in time to really pray about that. And maybe God would have told me no. And that would have been fine. Mm-hmm. But I didn't give him the chance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you knew your wife at the time. How did y'all, if you're at Southern Nazarene, she's at OBU, how did that happen?
So both of us were attending another church with friends.
Okay.
So it was neither one of ours church. Yeah. It was a mutual friend of a friend of a friend. So it was at Covenant Community Church in Yukon, I think is what it was. Okay. Anyway, Truth Youth is where we went. Okay. And so I was in college, she was in college, so we were actually going there as sponsors with our friends who were also college age, and they were kind of sponsors. And so we were just hanging out. And, my friend wanted to date her friend, and so we kind of went out on some double dates together, and that was the first introduction. So we went out a couple of times, and that was kind of the end of it at that point in time, because we were, she's in Shawnee and I'm in Bethany, and so it wasn't convenient.
Yeah.
Well, so then several years later, I was already graduated. I had been through some other stuff. She's a couple years behind me. So when she graduated, she sends me this email. And just out of the blue, I get this email. And it was fortunate that I was working at SNU at the time. So I still had my same email address that I had all this time that I was a student at SNU. So she knew how to reach me. And just out of the blue, get this email. And she's like, hey, you want to go and do something? And actually, at that point in time, what she was asking me to do is to go out on a date to a dance, to swing dance. Because I was back during the swing dancing craze.
Yeah.
So the W's and all that, so I was going to go on the swing dance with her. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to go. I mean, she's a cute girl and it sounded like a lot of fun. That's kind of my thing. It's like, if it's fun, let's go do it.
Yeah.
And,
so are you a good dancer then?
Not a good dancer.
You just enjoy it.
I've got the guts to get out there and try it.
I love that.
But we've danced a lot. Andrea and I have danced a lot. So we made plans to go out, and then I actually got sick. Andrea gives me a hard time about when I get sick. I really get sick. So I got sick and I couldn't make it. And so I had to bail on her last minute. Well, so I tried to make it up to her by having another date, and then, then things did what they did. We ended up having a really great relationship. She put up with me for a while. Our first actual date, what I consider our first date, we went those few years before on the double dates and stuff. But our first real date, I took her to what used to be the 89ers. Then I guess it was the Red Hawks at that point in time, baseball team. And now, what are they? I don't even know.
The Comets.
Comets?
Oklahoma City Comets.
What happened to the Dodgers?
I don't know. It lasted 2 years.
OKC Dodgers was actually kind of cool. I miss the 89ers. Yeah. Anyway, I think 89ers.
I remember seeing the 89ers when they were at the fairgrounds or whatever. I was little.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I thought it's a good opportunity to go sit someplace. We don't have to stare at each other. We can be sitting next to each other. We can talk as much as we want to talk, or we can pay attention to the game if the conversation lulls, and, you know, eat hot dogs. So cool. Well, she didn't have a wonderful time, but we got together for another date after that, and another date after that, and another date after that. And so we really hit it off well, even though, you know, sports are not our thing.
Yeah. That's awesome. So when did you know that she was the one for you?
Well, we had a DTR, a determine the relationship. But I got to step back just a little bit before
Is
that.
that like a Facebook status thing?
It probably is now.
Yeah.
Probably is now. No, the DTR was like, you got to have a conversation to determine the relationship.
Okay.
Where are we? Are we, you know, exclusive? Are we still, you know, dating other people or whatever? So we had that DTR, but I do need to tell you a little bit of other story before I get there. So I had a relationship straight out of college before Andrea and I got together. This girl that, you know, unfortunately, it turned sexual really fast. And both of us fell into this headlong, and it was just not a good relationship. We weren't good together. Everybody else saw the red flags. We didn't see the red flags because all we saw was sex. And it was actually, it had come to the point that we were engaged to get married. We were about 3 months away from our wedding date. All the plans were being made. And the reason why we were engaged is because we felt shame because we couldn't stop having sex. We were Christians, but we couldn't stop. And so we're heading towards this marriage that was based on all the wrong reasons. And finally, here we are 3 months away from the wedding date. And I'm about to go down to Dallas with her to finalize some details related to the wedding. And my mom, my very wise mom, set me aside and she said, if you two get married, I don't want you to have children. And like, whoa, that really caught my attention, because at that point in time, my older brother, I guess, I don't think he was in any relationship. My sister was married, but didn't have any plans to have kids. My younger brother's 4 years younger than me. So my mom really wanted grandkids, but there was no grandkids on the radar at all. So for her to tell me that, it really caught my attention. And so I started questioning everything. I started talking with anybody that I could about that, anybody who knew us together. I talked again with my best friend, Casey, and Casey was like, give me 30 minutes. I'm going to come back with a bullet point list.
Oh my
And he did.
gosh.
I also talked with 2 or 3 other pastors that day, just friends of ours that knew us together. And basically all of them came back with this. They said, if this relationship is right today, then it's also going to be right 6 months from now. It's also going to be right 2 years from now. So there is absolutely no reason for you not to put the brakes on this if you have any questions about it. Better now than 2 years into marriage and everything falls apart.
Yeah.
So I did. I went and I talked to her that night as we were supposed to be heading down to Dallas. Instead, we had a conversation that turned into a knockdown, drag out fight. And we ended up breaking up that night. And one of the hardest things I had ever had to do up to that point in my life was call her dad in the middle of the night. It was after midnight. Had to call him and ask him to come and pick her up from Dallas, to come pick her up in Oklahoma City, because, I mean, frankly, I didn't feel safe leaving her alone. Not that she is so broken up about me. It was just, I just didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
So sitting there waiting on her parents to show up at like 4 a.m. That was really hard.
Yeah.
That was really hard.
I'm curious, how did you respond? Because obviously you probably had love for her and emotions towards her. And we know, like, we've all experienced it with other friends or kids of our own, what it's like to give them feedback on their relationships. And usually it's not really received. So you're in the situation where you're the one receiving feedback. How did you handle that? Do you have any wisdom that you would share from that season?
I would say listen to the people who know you best. And if they're telling you about red flags that they see, be willing to accept that. You know, if there are people that you love and that you trust and that they know you really well, they probably know you better than you know yourself. You can't always trust your emotions in that moment. So somebody who has a little bit of separation from it, but that can see what's going on, you know, if you know and you trust them, then take their advice to heart. You know, my mom had expressed some things to me up to that point. Her dad had expressed some stuff to us. She's like, you guys aren't ready to get married, but if this is really what you want to do, then okay. Yeah. And, you know,
was there something in your mom's delivery in that kind of final thought, the turning point, that either the tone or the way she approached you that made it like really get your attention?
Well, the thing that really stands out is what she said about grandkids.
Because you knew where she was on
Yeah,
that.
I knew where she was, and I knew how important that was to her. And to tell me that she didn't want us to have kids, that it was like her version of sacrifice. It's like, if you're going to do this, then I'm sacrificing my love, my desire for grandchildren on behalf of you, because I don't think that it would be right.
Yeah.
I think it would be a bad thing for you guys to do that.
Yeah.
So that really caught my attention. So maybe that kind of self-sacrifice piece of it is what really got my attention in it.
And in a way, she was kind of saying, you're not going to last, so don't get kids in the mix.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. You know, my mom, very wise. She's very wise.
Yeah.
Not too long before that, my parents actually got a divorce after 25 years of marriage, which was, you know, that rocked my world too.
Yeah.
And in that, she came to me afterwards, all of us kids, and she said, the relationship that you have grown up with thinking that this is what a marriage relationship is supposed to be has not been a good relationship. So you've had a bad example given to you. You need to find somebody else to go and model your future relationships after. So that humility really spoke to me as well. And recognizing that she and my dad had not done a good job of modeling for us what a marriage relationship is supposed to be. So
was that just intimacy or?
Yeah, there's intimacy. There was spiritual roles within the family. There's respect for each other. Just what a relationship, the friendship that is supposed to be there. That's a piece of that. They didn't have that. And the thing is, I thought that was normal because that's what I had grown up with.
Yeah.
So I didn't know anything different. And so for her to be able to tell me, you need to find another example, look around, find some other people that are doing it well and model your future relationships after them. So that was huge. That was huge for me. So, I mean, my mom has hit me with a lot of those nuggets of wisdom through the years. So yeah, that fed into the situation. So then when she came to me with this, then I know she's also speaking from experience, that she's probably seeing some of the things that she had in her own life, maybe at that point in time, and wanting to help me avoid some of those same pitfalls.
Yeah. How's your relationship with your father?
It's good. It's good. Yeah. I have a good relationship with both of them. Still talk to him pretty regularly. Talked to mom this week, talked to dad a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So yeah, it's good. And, you know, unfortunately they weren't, at least they didn't feel like they were good together. You know, that's tough to see that. And, you know, looking back on it, I wish there was something that I could have done. I know that it wasn't the role for me at the time, but
okay. So back to
now back to Andrea. Yeah. So Casey, my best friend Casey, he helped me figure out these rules for self-discipline, really, in relationships. After coming out of that previous engagement relationship, he's like, okay, let's make this pact together.
And you wanted to do it differently?
I wanted to do it differently. I didn't want to fall into that again. Yeah. So he's like, so we made this agreement that I would not date anybody for 6 months following that breakup. And then once I did finally start dating somebody, we wouldn't even approach the idea of marriage until we had been together for 12 months at least. So it's like, okay, seemed like a good idea. Let's go ahead and do that. So those 6 months were hard because there were some people that I really wanted to go out with, and they wanted to go out with me too. But this girl was, one particular girl was very understanding and respectful of that decision.
Yeah. Poor Jeff's just so desirable.
I know. It's like, come on, ladies,
beating down the door.
please. So anyway, yeah, we sucked that agreement. And so those 6 months were tough. But once I did start dating, to be honest, I kind of like wore myself out. Anybody that would say yes, I was like, yeah, let's go out. And it's not like we were doing anything. Yeah. We were just hanging out, going to do something, going out to dinner, whatever. And, ran out of money pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Because I was basically making peanuts at the time. And so, ran out of money really fast. That got expensive. And I just kind of got tired of it. So it was when I finally got tired of it. And I was like, okay, I'm not even interested in girls anymore. That's when that email came from Andrew. So it was, looking back on it is kind of this aha moment of when you are searching for something, trying to do it all on your own. You might come across something, but when you finally just give it up and let God do things on his own timing, that's when he brings you what he really wants to give you. Yeah. And so it was when I was, you could say it like I'm at the end of my rope or whatever. That's not quite the right expression, but I was,
there's
I was
an
done
aspect of
trying.
surrender, right?
Yeah, there was. I was done trying on my own, trying to find some girl, and God had a better plan all along. And when the timing was right, he put us together.
That's awesome. Did you make the 12-month pact?
Almost. So you know how you go through these seasons? It's like there's seasons of people getting married, seasons of friends having children, all this kind of stuff. So we're in this season of all of our friends getting married. Casey and Summer got married, and my mom and her husband, they got married during that time period. And so all of this was like at the 9-month mark, at the 10-month mark, at the 11-month mark. So we were almost at 12 months. But finally I was like, Casey, there's marriage in the air. There's weddings happening like every other weekend that we're a part of. I've got to talk to her about this.
Contagious.
So it was like, it was at about 11 months, something like that. So we almost got to 12.
Yeah.
But then once we finally started talking, it actually all happened pretty fast. But at that point in time, all the people that I trusted, they were all like,
affirming it.
Yes, this is right. This is good. You guys are good for each other. All those red flags that were there previously, not present at all. Everybody's like, move forward with this. This is good. Oh yeah. 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 So, all the people that I trusted, they were coming back with thumbs up. Let's go forward with this. This is really, really good. Yeah. And they were right. And 22 years later, we can attest to that. See, really, really good.
We need to cut these parts out as like a short reel to share like your previous story of being in a relationship that where all the red flags were there, everybody was talking to you, and then this part, put that in a reel and send it to all the parents so they can use it with their kiddos. It's
my wife is. We joke about this, but I think there's a lot of value to it. She's a big advocate of arranged marriages, at least informed marriages, advised marriages. Yeah, it's like I may not pick exactly the guy and say, you're definitely going to marry this guy, and this is the only guy for you. But I could say, okay, well, here's this pool of 5 guys that I approve. Yeah. Would one of these work for you? Because, and what I know now about temperaments and other things like that, I can pair people up and be like, this is actually a really good fit for you. These people, they have similar core values as you. You are going to be able to thrive and be friends and be helpers to each other. Yeah. As opposed to somebody that you're going to be fighting with all the time and you have complete disagreements about everything from children to money to what kind of house you want to live in. Yeah.
Or can we just get like 10 pass cards or something? Pass. Next one.
Yeah, like a veto card.
Yeah, veto.
Yeah. I just recently went through with Gabe because, he's had a couple of crushes and things like that. And so it's like, we should probably talk about what dating looks like. Like, what does that mean to you? But then too, like I had a list before I met Meg. And it was, turned out to the T. I mean, Meg hit all the marks. And so I talked with him and I'm like, we probably need to make a list of what you desire. And then I had some suggestions as far as like what would fill his weak points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so complementary.
Yeah.
And before he has feelings for someone, because in that list just looks like whoever you have a crush on, like, yep, that's the one, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
all those boxes I didn't have, she checks them.
Yeah, exactly. So we just went through that process a bit, and probably still need to work on it a little bit, but I think that's so important.
That's
to
awesome.
ahead of time to put out, your requirements down to personality and strengths and weakness and goals and dreams and all those things. Because we tend to compromise when we're caught up in the moment, those red flags to us, we're completely blind.
Yeah.
And it's so good that you were able to actually hear that from your mom. But yeah, I think that's a good idea as far as, I'm not saying arranged marriages are the deal, but it doesn't talk about dating in the Bible.
Right.
Dating
is an American construct.
It really is. Yeah. So, and it's practicing for marriage. Like we talk about it a lot in our house. It's like dating is practicing for marriage, like getting to know someone and sacrifice yourself and compromise and all those things. But when you have breakup after breakup after breakup, you're really practicing divorce.
Yeah,
right.
That's exactly right.
Because no matter how physically intimate you are, you can't help but to be emotionally invested. And so they take a part of you away.
Yeah.
Whenever that relationship is severed.
Right.
So how do you navigate that so that you have a whole heart when you do meet the one?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway.
So yeah. I think a lot of that, as we know, there's the sexual intimacy is such a small part of marriage, to be honest. I mean, of all the time you spend together, yeah, it's wonderful and it's necessary and it's part of what a marriage relationship is. But the friendship aspect, the just relationship of building a life together, having a family together, making meals together, watching movies together, all these different things that are just how you spend your time.
Yeah.
That is so much more of the relationship than the sexual intimacy, than this urge that we feel to connect physically. And it's a piece of it, but to be honest, it's a pretty minor piece of it. Important, but it doesn't take up that much time of the overall relationship. So all those other things are so much more important, and figuring those things out can be done in a way that is not compromising those other things. It's not compromising the sexual integrity. You don't even have to approach that. Why awaken love before it desires? You're just causing trouble. The Bible's been telling us about this for millennia.
No, totally agree.
Yeah. So we were talking about the DTR.
Yeah.
So when I had that DTR with Andrea, we had been dating now for probably about 6 months, I would guess. And I was actually about to go on a trip, fishing trip. And so had the plans to leave and all this, but we were kind of together one last night before we went out. So we're hanging out, and I decided we need to have this talk. Let's see where we are. And so I expressed to her, I'm not interested in dating anybody else. She's the only girl for me right now. And so she said, well, good, because you're the only guy for me right now too. So we decided, okay, we're exclusive. Well, then I went on this trip, and so I was gone for like 2 weeks. And fortunately, everything was still great when I got back. but it was a decision, a determination at that point in time that we're going to be together. We're going to make this exclusive. And essentially what that was a move towards marriage. Even though we weren't talking about marriage, it was a level up in our relationship that said, okay, now we're a little more serious, and we're actually considering each other for the next step. So then eventually we did get there.
Yeah. So how long were y'all engaged and all that?
That happened fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our engagement was about 3 months.
Okay.
Because at that point, both of us were graduated from college. We're both working. I was living at at my mom's house. She was living at her parents' house. We had everything ready.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing holding us back.
Yeah.
And again, we had already been through this process of all of our friends, all of our family is like, yes, this is right. This is right. Everything's good. You should move forward with this. We'd already been together for over a year at this point in time. So we had seen each other through all the emotional, like holiday seasons and the stresses and various things like that. So there was nothing else to wait for.
Yeah.
So she's a planner at heart. She loves planning. So I was like, okay, we got engaged, and so she was off to the races. She's like, okay, let's figure this thing out.
Yeah.
And so she did. She put it together really fast. We weren't in a hurry. We weren't in a rush, but we knew what we wanted.
Yeah.
And it all came together pretty quickly.
That's awesome. Okay. So young married couple, y'all in Oklahoma City area still?
Yeah.
Are you still working at Southern Nazarene or?
No, I started working at a small nonprofit organization called Christian Networks, and I was the second employee at this nonprofit organization. So this was my nonprofit experience.
Nice.
Yeah. That was good. I enjoyed working for Gordy, was the guy who started that, and Gordy and I got along really well, and it was great, and really enjoyed what we were doing. Andrew and I were together during that time period. Like, we got married while I was working at Christian Networks. And then shortly after that, the nonprofit kind of went through some trouble. And since I was the second employee, I was the one who got the boot. And so then I started looking for other things. And at that point in time, Andrew and I were talking about what we wanted to do with our lives. We weren't having kids. We weren't planning on having kids right away. And so we made plans to go to China, teach English as a second language. So we had the plans made. We had the jobs lined up. We had the tickets bought. We were going to go to China and teach for a year. And then we bought like around the world tickets to where we could just, as long as we kept going that same direction, we could just keep going from place to place to place. And we were just going to go until we didn't have any more money and then come back home. That was the plan. Maybe not the wisest plan, but that was the plan. And so, yeah, we were ready to go, months away. And then we found out we're pregnant.
Oh.
And so we're like, okay, let's rethink this.
Yeah.
And God had a different plan. He did. We could have gone through with that. We could have gone over there and had Bree in China. But it was the first grandchild on both sides of the family. And we figured this is probably not a good idea. And now looking back on it, as it turns out, Bree was an emergency C-section, which is a different story in itself. But had we done that in the middle of rural China, who knows how that would have turned out?
Yeah.
Who knows? So I think God had a different plan for us all along. We bowed out of those jobs and got what money we could back out of those tickets that we had bought. Yeah. And instead of blowing money on that, which would have been a fun adventure with really nothing to show for it, we instead had that money that we were able to do some other things with and be more wise with, and buy a house and various things like that. So
on the surface, that can sound like you guys are going to do this crazy cool, rare adventure, once in a lifetime deal. And yet you're transitioning into the more of a traditional, safe, normal routine. How did y'all's heart respond to that? Was there some intentional just reframing you guys had to do to manage the disappointment, or did it just organically, like, everything felt right? Describe that. Yeah. Well,
it did feel right. And we spent a lot of time praying about that. What should we do in this situation? What's the right thing? And in a lot of ways, looking back on it now, I can see how God really did have his hand in that. Like the C-section, for example. Gosh, I can't even imagine what that would have been like in some small town out in the middle of China. Some other things, like, yeah, we felt just lots of assurances of this is the right thing to do. That would have been fun, but there's different adventure, and there has been different adventure.
Yeah.
That just having a child is
Yeah.
so exciting.
Yeah.
That we were absolutely thrilled, scared because we had never had a child before, but we were so thrilled. We were so excited to have a baby, and Bree's been amazing, and Evan too. Just amazing children. But yeah, the excitement of having a baby and starting a family, more traditional, if you will.
Yeah.
Not that same level of adventure, but a different kind of adventure that took us in a totally different way.
I guess that kind of makes is even a better question of like, was your longing for adventure replaced in that way,
Yeah, it was. And I've got this picture of me when Bree came home. I'm holding her and kind of like looking out the window, looking all stoic, and the light's just perfect and all that. It's a cool picture. But I remember the feeling of that, of being home, and now I've got this daughter to protect, to raise. And that I just remember, God's like, this is your responsibility now. This is a different thing than you've ever done in your life. And go for it, man. Here's the keys. Run with it. Do well. So yeah, it's a different adventure.
That's awesome. So you started raising a family.
Yeah.
Let's kind of get back into the spiritual side of things, and what did those years of early parenthood and mid-parenthood look like for you guys?
So we were in a pretty young church at that point in time. And for better or for worse, I was appointed as an elder at this young church. I was one of the older of the young people, I guess. I was definitely in no shape to be an elder. In fact, one of my worst moments happened when I was serving as an elder at this church. It involved alcohol and karaoke and encouraging girls to do things that they shouldn't have been doing. And, it actually took a friend of mine to pull me aside and say, Jeff, what the heck are you doing? You've got a wife, you've got kids at home. You are not being yourself here tonight. And he kind of shook me out of that. And so the relationship that I had with the Lord, the relationship I had with my wife at that point in time is, this is a really bad thing. I don't want to go here any longer. So that next morning I went home I went home that night, but that next morning I had a conversation with my wife, told her about everything that happened. And she was very understanding, but also, what can we do to keep this from happening again? And we put some boundaries in place. I wasn't going to go to that place any longer. I wasn't going to go there. For whatever reason, that place might have been a trigger for me. So I'm not going to go to that place anymore. Not going to drink more than 2 alcoholic beverages whenever I go out. So some things like that just kind of became mainstays of self-disciplines that can help keep me from falling into those situations, to keep me off the X, keep me out of the danger zone. And so that's a lot of where my relationship with my wife, but also kind of where my relationship with the Lord was at that point in time of, I'm growing, I'm maturing. And part of that maturity was learning what those boundaries are, learning how to protect myself from doing the things that I don't want to do. And having people around me and structure around me that helps prevent that. So yeah, I was growing and getting closer to the Lord, but a lot of that had to do with structure and self-discipline. Not that I've got it all together, but through the years, little bits of self-discipline have grown and gotten better and better.
Yeah. So what happened going from there?
Well, I was elder of that church, one of the elders of that church. In the end, it was time for us to move on from there and do some other things. We went to another church that when we moved to this next church, it opened my eyes to a lot of spiritual things that I was uncomfortable with. A lot more of the listening for the Holy Spirit. Where is the Holy Spirit guiding you? Healing, gifts of the Spirit, various things like that. And that was pretty uncomfortable for me. It really stretched me.
Yeah.
Because I did not grow up that way.
Okay. What was the emotion what was your emotions that you felt? I get you're saying it's hard, but like.
It was, well, I was hesitant, but also excited, because I could see it happening. I saw people speaking in tongues. I saw healing happening. I saw, major spiritual gifts going on right in front of me. And I knew that it wasn't faked because I knew these people. Mm-hmm. And I just hadn't experienced that before. But I was also kind of standoffish. I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to take those next steps.
Yeah.
But the more I kind of allowed myself to sit under people who were showing me new things and engage with the Holy Spirit into the unknown, it gave me the courage to take those next steps. Mm-hmm. So I came across something just the other day, the 4 C's. We don't always start with confidence. In fact, usually we don't. We start with commitment. Mm-hmm. And you commit to something, and then that leads to the courage that you need. As you start to move into something that you're uncomfortable with, the more you do it, the more courageous you get at doing mm-hmm. it. And you're exercising that courage more and more. And then as you're exercising that courage, that builds capacity. And then eventually that capacity leads to the confidence mm-hmm. that you were wanting in the very beginning. Yeah. But comfort is not in there anywhere. It's not one of the 4 C's. Nope. It's not comfortable, but it starts with that commitment. And so as I was seeing these other people doing these things, and it was something that I wanted, very uncomfortable, but I was like, okay, let's get into this. Let's give it a try. Yeah. And that's around the time that God started talking to me about sonship. Yeah. I don't know if you remember, there were a couple of songs like, you're a good, good father. Mm-hmm. That's who you are. So things like that. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Those songs were popular at this point in time. God was really speaking to me about himself as father and me as a son. And so that was already starting to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's right around the time that I got invited to Basecamp. Yeah. And then also leading to this point, like still underground pornography. Still underground pornography. All the way to this point. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And, I say underground. My wife knew. Okay. She knew that it was a problem. She didn't know every time that I did it. Right. And I don't know that she knew how much of a problem that it was. Mm-hmm. But at different times I had expressed to her, this is still an ongoing problem. I'm sorry, I'm trying, but it was still a problem. Okay. Yeah. How did you get invited to Basecamp or find out about it? Yeah. So my brother-in-law, Daniel Castle, he went to camp. This would have been 2017. So it was a spring camp, probably like March or April. Mm-hmm. And he came back from that camp, and to all the guys at church, me included, and he's like, dude, I just went to this camp. I'm going back to the very next one. Who's coming with me? And he recruited 20 guys from our church to go to that camp. Yeah. It was awesome. It changed the life of the men's group at that whole church. Yeah. And so we came back. So May 2017 was my first camp. Mm. And I was the same way. I came back from that camp like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I'm going back to the very next one. It was like I had been in church my whole life. I had experienced so much. I can't tell you how many camps that I went to and retreats, because when I was working at SNU, I was recruiting. So I was going to camps then, and I can't tell you how many. But Basecamp was so different. It was like teaching me things I had never seen before. Mm. And hearing from God in ways that I had never heard from God before. And so I was in. Yeah. And I wanted to come back to the very next one. So I did. And then I started recruiting guys. And so Casey came with me to that next one. And man, it was a powerful change in my life.
How would you describe? So if you were speaking to someone who said, "Oh, I've been to all these camps before. This is just another camp." And you've already said that, no, it's different. How would you describe
Mm-hmm.
how it's different to someone that maybe is coming at it with that approach?
Well, it made me realize that you can hear from God. It's not just a fancy preacher. It's not just some mountaintop experience. You actually can hear from God. And so much of it is turning everything else off.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting the noise out of the way and setting aside time, being intentional to create time and space for God to speak. You know, I've felt ever since the first time I went to camp that God is always speaking. We're just usually not listening.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can just shut off the noise, turn off the phone, and we could do that on our own, but who does?
Mm-mm.
You know, I might turn off my phone for an afternoon, but it takes a few days. It takes a few days to just get everything to shut down and to turn off inside your brain. And that's really when there's enough silence that you can hear from God. Now, I know some people have this conversational thing. They're just constantly hearing and talking and going, and that's awesome. And I love it. And I long for more of that. But what I do know is when I can shut it all off, the phone, the noise, the busyness of life, when I can put all that on pause for a few days, that's where God makes his voice heard.
Yep. Still small voice.
Yeah. There's also an element to like you just show up and everything's taken care of for you. You don't have to think about what you're going to eat, about what you're going to do that day. You just show up where you're supposed to be and receive.
Yeah. And the message of Basecamp is fantastic as well. You know, I kind of knew sort of like I had read Wild at Heart when I was in college. So I had a general idea of things like wounds and how that leads to agreements and things like that. But I didn't have the language to put around it. It definitely wasn't something that I was actively working on or recognizing in my life or living and breathing the way that I've grown to now, to where, you know, eventually you get to a point where you're like, that's an agreement.
Yeah.
I need to break that right now. You know, something comes out of your mouth and you're like, oh, how long have I had that agreement?
Yeah.
Let's get that broken.
Yeah.
You know, but you don't recognize those until you really take the time to study it and to engage with it. And, you know, again, that's part of the magic of Basecamp, I guess, is just separating yourself from all the noise so that you can actually receive all of that.
Are you a big activities guy at Basecamp?
You know, I used to be more than I am now.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Caleb McKeon is a friend of mine that I went to church with, and I just actually reconnected with him this week. And part of how I reintroduced myself to him is like, we were at Basecamp together once, and we were on the paintball team together. And he's like, oh yeah, that's right. So yeah, I mean, those first couple of base camps for sure, I was jumping into paintball and, you know, we played laser tag at night and all that stuff. Now I love the movies also. I'm always ready for a movie when it comes to Friday night. All those previews that are played throughout the other times just makes me want to watch a movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm typically very engaged. This last time I was at camp, man, that first afternoon, I took a nap.
Yep.
I was out hard. I was snoozing right in the middle of the chapel. There's activity happening. There's people playing laser tag all around me. Yeah. I was out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. What would you say the fruit was in your life after your first base camp?
Yeah. Well, I think Andrea noticed a difference almost right away. You know, it was recognition of things that had happened previously in my life, understanding of why I have a tendency to do things the way that I do, what some of those woundings or patterns or other things might have been that have led to this. And then working on ways to correct. You know, like, I've had this image in my head for a long time for a while, I referred to it as well-worn paths. It's like, you know, if you see if you see a windy river, this satellite imagery or aerial photography or something, a river, and it's swishing back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Well, over time, there will be a portion of it that kind of pushes over the edge, or two curves come together. And now the path of the river has changed. So you've got this swoop that's way out there. They call it an oxbow lake. That oxbow lake is still filled with water, but the path of the river doesn't flow there anymore. Because now something has changed and the river has gone a new course. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, whenever we come to that new path that we've chosen, the old way is still a low point, because for decades the water has flowed that way. And so the groove is so deep. That's why water still collects there. So if something comes along and now blocks off this new path that you created, well, where's the water going to go? It's going to go right back along that old path. Mm. So yeah, I started to figure out some new things, some changes to my behaviors, tried to implement those things. It didn't always work because it's so easy to fall back into that well-worn path. Mm-hmm. And so that's very much true of pornography, the struggle that I had to overcome that, because it's so easy to fall back into those things. It's so easy. I've done it so many times. So I'm trying to carve something new, but it doesn't take much to block that off and take me back down the other path.
Yeah.
And
that's
so
a really good visual.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's good.
Yeah. God gave me that a while ago, and it's really helped me because I recognize that in my own life.
Yeah. And it's almost like the fight that we're being called into is to keep that path accessible for the water to flow where it's supposed to go. Right. Like, just keep that accessible.
Right. Mm. So Basecamp was 2017, but 2020 is when I started getting into Conquer, and that goes hand in glove with Basecamp. Yeah. You know, there's so much common language. And so one of the things they say in Conquer is that they're talking about the elasticity of the brain. Like, we have pathways in our brains that the more we use those pathways, good or bad, it's strengthening those connections within your brain. Well, so you can change that as well. If you've got a bad habit that you've been doing, pornography, for example, it can be changed. It takes time. It takes effort, but it can be changed. So in doing that, that's another example of that, trying to create a new path. But the well-worn path is still there. You got to be careful. You got to put boundaries around yourself. But we can carve new paths that are better.
Can you describe, a lot of our audience might not know, did I say that right? What Conquer is. Mm-hmm. Can you describe what Conquer is?
Yeah. So the Conquer series, it's a 10-week program that is designed to be done within a small group. So it's geared towards men, but I know women who have been a part of it as well. And it is designed to help men get free from sexual sin, particularly pornography.
And it's you meet one night a week.
One night a week. Yep. A 10-week program, meet one night a week, designed to be within a small group. So a typical night, we'll get together. There'll be, 5, 6, 8 of us. We will see how we've been doing throughout the week. What have been our struggles? What kind of victories have we had? Pray together. We'll watch the video together for that week. It's usually like a 35, 45-minute video. And then there's a study guide that goes along with it. So we can go and do the study guide throughout the week as we are going through our stuff, and then come back together the next week to see how we did and encourage each other, learn a new lesson, and then go through it all again. So by the end of the 10 weeks, we've been through 10 lessons that talk about how we can overcome sexual sin. And it's also reinforced this small group setting and how powerful that accountability is, giving us a lot of tools in our tool belt to help overcome the sexual sin that we don't want in our lives. Yeah. So at this point, I've been facilitating groups for about 5 years, been through Conquer, 12 times, 15 times, something like that. Yeah. And there are step twos to that, there's like another thing called Warpath that's part of the same program, and I've done some of that too. But it seems like every time I get through Conquer, some of the other guys will decide they want to move on or do something else, but then there's a whole new group of guys that needs Conquer again, and I love taking them through it because it's been such a powerful impact on me that I want to help other guys get the same experience.
And so if a guy's listening to this, where you are, the underground has been eating at them. What's their next step? How do they get it to be a part of Conquer?
So on True North's website, you can find a link to Conquer. And if you put your information in there, that'll eventually come to me. And so I can reach out to you and connect. And we can figure out when is a Conquer group that'll work for you. Because there are several different group facilitators around town, some in Moore and some here in Oklahoma City, some up in Edmond. So we can definitely connect you with the group different nights of the week. Some people even meet really early in the morning. So we'll find something that works. But man, get into the group.
Yeah.
That's the advice, is get into a group and just get started with it.
Yeah.
Now, since it is a 10-week program, it could be that somebody else is on like week 5 or 6. Well, it wouldn't be great to jump in right then, but within, another 5 or 6 weeks, there'll probably be another group starting soon. So we'll get you on the list and talk to you about what's best, figure it out. There is hope.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I remember feeling so hopeless that I'm never going to get over this. But there is victory.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There is victory from this. I'm not totally free, but I'm so much further down the path than I was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So much further.
In leading Conquer groups, tell us kind of where God is leading and turning your heart toward kind of doing this vocationally and counseling and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, it was actually through Conquer that God started leading me in a new direction. One of the guys came up to me one time and just asked if I could visit with him for a little bit about some personal stuff that was going on that he wasn't really comfortable sharing with the whole group. And so I sat down with him for a few minutes. And after talking with him, he was expressing how he was trying to get into a marriage counselor with his wife, but there's like a 3 or 4 month wait time before he could even get in there for their first visit. In the meantime, they're struggling. They need somebody right now. And I just kind of jokingly, I was like, well, maybe I ought to go and get a license to become a counselor. And he was like, yeah, you really ought to do that.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of joking, but God took me seriously. He took me seriously, this guy that I was talking to. So I started digging into that, exploring what that would look like. And around this time, I had also been feeling a call into ministry, but I didn't really know quite what it was. My wife and I were kicking around, being a teacher in China again, or, we're nothing was off the table. We're like, maybe it's missions, maybe it's being a pastor at a church, maybe, I don't know. And then this thing came along and it's like, okay, well, maybe it's being a counselor. Maybe that's where the Lord's leading me. And the more I dug into that, the more, again, talking with trusted people who are counselors, people who are in ministry, people who I trust and know. My mom was like, yeah, this feels right. I think this is the right path for you. And so I connected with Trey Dixon. He's been a big mentor for me in this process. Another lady named Charlie Glenn has been really helpful to me in this process and just giving me advice and direction and where's the best place to go and get this licensing and how do you build your website and how do you, get the word out, all these things. So I've had a lot of help along the way, a lot of really great mentors that have given me some great advice and pointed me in the right directions.
That's incredible.
So, yeah.
So what's that going to look like logistically? Like how much time are you available for and what kind of clientele are you looking for?
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah. Well, we are definitely still growing. I say we, it's me and my wife. My wife kind of helps me, not so much in the counseling, but in the admin.
Or she just counsels you.
She counsels me after
other people.
Yeah. It's like, it's okay, Jeff. You're going to be out. Just breathe. No. So yeah, right now I am still working another full-time job and that's been a blessing in itself. That's really great. But because of that, I'm kind of limited on times that I have available. Typically all day on Friday, all day on Saturday, I'm available. Tuesday evenings, Wednesday evenings. So all that schedule is available on my website. So that can all be seen there. But that's what's available right now. But the arrangement that I have with my job that I've been at for almost 18 years, they're being so generous to me. Blue Source, I've been with Blue Source for 18 years and super, super generous. They are allowing me to have this relationship that as my practice grows and I need another day, well, they'll just let me take another day. And now I'll work 30 hours there a week instead of 40 hours a week.
Wow.
And then eventually, if I need another day, now I'll work 20 hours a week instead of 30 hours a week. And so
That's awesome.
they're being super flexible with me in that.
Yeah.
And I count it as a huge blessing.
That's awesome. What kind of, and then your clientele, what kind of,
Yeah.
who should look to seek your services?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm doing a lot of different things, a lot of different types of people, but to be honest, the thing that I'm most engaged with, most interested in is young men.
Yeah.
Because I've stepped in a lot of potholes in my life, and I want to be able to help young men overcome those and avoid those. So like, for example, I get so excited when I see these 18, 20-year-olds at Basecamp.
Yeah.
That they're getting this stuff now at 18, 20 years old that I didn't get until I was almost 40.
Yeah.
And man, that's huge. That is huge for them to be able to get that kind of thing. So in the same way, yeah, I want to be able to share with young men. I'm really passionate about that and helping them to navigate life, figure out what are the best things that they can do moving forward. Yeah, we'll talk about stuff like the wounds and agreements and what's already happened in their lives that it's going to happen or that is going to lead to things in their future if they don't change the direction now before those paths get so well worn. Right. But then also strategizing with them about where are you headed? What are you doing in life? How can I help you get there? How can we navigate this? Now I'm also doing marriage counseling and also individual counseling for people who are a little bit older too. So it's not just young men, but that's just a particular passion that I have.
Yeah. And so you can get us we'll put your website link into the show notes for this so that anybody can find that. I'd love to touch back on, as we wrap up, kind of your experience and growth within True North as well. I know we started inviting you into being a part of the prayer team, and you've had a lot of really cool opportunities to lead and serve within True North. You got any favorites you'd love to share, or what are some of your favorite things to do within True North? Yeah.
So I have been part of the prayer team for quite a while. And I think it was probably around like 2018, 2019, something like that, I got a message from you, James, and you were saying something about a training session that was coming up and momentum, I guess. And I was like, does this mean I'm being called up to the big leagues? And you're like, yes, that's exactly what it means. So yeah, I mean, from that moment, going to momentum, I was really engaged, wanted to be a part. Again, similar to Conquer, because I had such a great experience, I want to help facilitate that for other guys too. And so prayer team is where I felt led. And I had a cool experience last fall. This was a camp up in Kansas, and praying over the list of guys the day before camp. This is Wednesday before Thursday when I left out there. And I had been encouraged by somebody to fast before camp, just fast lunch and pray over them. So I decided I did that. So went out to my car, and instead of eating lunch, I'm just praying over this list. And God hasn't always done this, but in this instance, he started like downloading specific words for all these guys for me. And so I didn't have anything to write on. I just pulled out my phone and got into notes and started typing all these things out, because some of it was bizarre. Some of it was very, very simple. It's like engage, for this guy or whatever. But then the next guy would be so cliche. But then the next one would be something really crazy, like, let it go, Martha, Martha, you don't have to work all the time. Just sit at the feet of Jesus. I'm like, I'm gonna have to write that one down. So I did, but then, I got there to camp, and I'm thinking, it's a small camp. It's like 25 people, something like that. So I'm thinking I'll have an opportunity to go and talk with all of them, probably at camp, and we'll see where it goes. Maybe, maybe not. I don't trust myself. But when I get there, and I found this one guy, and I was like, I don't know if I got this right, but I felt like God told me this. Martha, Martha, you don't have to work so hard. Just sit at the feet of Jesus. And he's like, oh my gosh. That, are you serious? Oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed to hear. So
Was
stuff
it was
like
it
that.
Christopher?
No, no, it wasn't. But Christopher knew that guy. And when I told Christopher ahead of time, he was like, man, I can't wait to hear what he says. That's exactly spot on for him. And so, and some of the guys were like, well, yeah, I guess engage. Sure. I'll see what that means. I don't know. But there was one guy at that camp. For some reason, I couldn't talk with him. It's like every time I was about to go sit down with him, somebody else would sit down there or whatever. I just like kept getting blocked off throughout the camp. Most of the guys I was talking to Thursday or Friday or whatever. Well, so finally, here we are, Saturday. Bonfire's already happened. And we're all just kind of sitting around. People are filtering off. And finally, he's alone. And I go and sat down next to him after the bonfire. And I said, I've been trying to sit down and talk to you this whole weekend about this. I felt like God told me this word for you is legacy. Does that mean anything to you? And he goes, bro, just today, Saturday afternoon, I wrote down in my journal, legacy. And we went on to talk about what this means to him. But the cool thing about that is if I would have talked to him Thursday or Friday, it would have ruined the whole moment. God was preventing me from talking to him.
Yeah.
Because it made it a faith-building moment when on Saturday night, after God had already talked to him Saturday afternoon, I could come and bring that same word to him and tell him God gave me this
that he gave it to
3
you
days
on
ago.
Wednesday.
Yeah. So cool.
That's awesome.
So cool. So this last camp that I went to in, just a couple months ago in May, I was hoping God would do something similar. I was like, hey man, you did something cool last time. You gonna do this? You gonna do this? And he didn't. He didn't. So many times God's kind of been like, here, hold my beer. I'm gonna do something cool. And then this time God's like, I'm gonna do something different. Yeah. And at this camp, what God told me a few weeks leading up to camp is I had always thought of myself as prayer team lead, kind of like I'm part of the team. I'm like a player coach kind of thing. And this time I said prayer team lead. And as soon as I said that, God said, no, you're prayer director. I'm like, okay, what's the difference? And once I got to camp, I realized what the difference was. It was a bigger camp. There was a bigger team. A lot more men were there. And what God needed me to do at that is be more of a director to like stay in headquarters sort of. And instead of me being the one to go out and do things, ask one of the other prayer team guys to go out and do these things, to delegate to certain people, elevate them up into situations where they can go and be the ones to engage. And in fact, there was one situation where I saw somebody walk out the back door. And so, my first inclination is go follow him, see if I can go help with something. And as soon as I started going out there, God was like, no, not you. Send one of your guys. Yeah. So I was looking for Brandon's story because for some reason I just felt like Brandon was the right one. And so I couldn't find Brandon. So then I grabbed Heath and I was like, Heath, will you go out and check on this guy? And Heath did. He came back and he's like, yeah, he's fine. Everything's all right. I prayed for him, but he didn't really want to talk. So then afterwards I find Brandon. And I was like, Brandon, I was looking for you. Where were you? It's like, oh yeah, I was outside. I saw that guy come by. I was praying for him. He was covered. So it was like, God had already put Brandon out there. He was already in the right place. And so I didn't even need to be the one to send somebody out there because God was already taking care of it. Yeah. It was just a neat change of God putting me, same title, whatever, but a different role. I played a different role at this last camp. And so it was a new experience for me of allowing God to work in me in a new way and to see God work in these other people so that I could delegate to them and allow God to elevate them into a new experience instead of me being the one to do it.
That's so good.
It was really great.
Yeah. That's cool.
That's awesome. Well, Jeff, thanks for coming and sharing so much of your story. And thank you for stepping in and joining the big leagues, like you said in that text, because you have fit the role so well. You're so trusted within this whole organization by so many, by us, of course, and by so many volunteers. You lead so well, and you always bring your authentic self, which is really cool. I think of a time, it was before your first time responding, and you literally sang a song in it. And I'm like, dude, Like you got some cojones, man. Like you're up there singing in front of a group of men.
Yeah.
Like, but that's just your authentic self. You're not hesitant to share that side of you. And so, it's been cool to see that journey. And then the stuff with the Conquer group, it's like not many men will sign up to lead a group like that for as long as you have and do it so well. And so thank you big time from us that we can continue to offer that as a resource and have confidence that it'll be taken care of because of your quality of character.
Thank you.
And then really excited for your journey in counseling. And I definitely know God's in it. And it's interesting hearing your whole story, how many times you've been invited into leadership or something like everyone just sees something in you, from your uncles that were asking you into their churches to your eldership to, all this stuff with True North. Like there's some gravity to you, and you just exude leadership and genuineness and authenticity. And so, love that we get to do this together. Love the way you represent True North, the way you represent us at camps, and excited to keep doing it with you. You got any parting words you got for our True North audience?
Boy, I don't. I think we about talked about everything, didn't we?
Yeah. So good. Well, thank you for coming on.